Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki from the Windham 4 District of Putney, Dummerston, and Westminster. We're here as a wrap-up to the legislative session, even though the session isn't completely wrapped up. We have adjourned for the year, quote unquote, but we have a veto. We have several vetoes, but the governor has vetoed our budget, without which the government in Vermont will not be able to continue. I don't think we can do what they do in Washington, and we don't want to run things the way they do in Washington. One of the things that I've been proud to be part of the Vermont delegation is that we tend to keep things stable. We tend to keep things on a steady course, and unlike what's happening with the chaos every day coming out of Washington, that's what we want to keep trying to do. And unfortunately, it seems like some of that chaos from Washington is leaking down into Vermont, and I'm not happy with that, and I hope we can move past that right now. And to talk about that today, we have our other senator, Senator Becca Balint. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Well, good morning, and thanks for taking the time. A busy session. Yeah. I like to say senators are 10 times busier than House members because you represent 10 times the people. So I recognize even that we're back home, you've still got a lot to do. And,
I do. Thankfully, I love my job, so it is a lot of work, but I appreciate all the constituents who do reach out when I'm back home.
Yeah, and public service is what I've been doing for years, even before being elected as a public servant, and this is a great way to serve the public. Yeah. As we have been dealing with what's been happening in Washington, a lot of what we did this year was what I call the Trump protection plan, whether it was putting in place environmental protections before Trump totally guts the EPA, whether it's looking at how we work with immigrants within our community, rather than the Trump plan to turn the country into a police state, how we look at our economy, trying to make sure the economy works for everybody. And obviously, the president has turned the billionaires club into the economy that's just going to work for billionaires, as he's filled his cabinet with millionaires and billionaires, and certainly that's not Vermont. We've done a lot as we move forward into the next year. Let's start with economic development, though. The economy, prosperity is something that's on a lot of people's minds. Wages have been stagnant real wages have been stagnant for pretty much the last 10 years. But there are different things that we can do for the economy, and this is one of your committees, right?
It is. My morning committee is Economic Development and Housing, and it's great that those two are linked in committee because they're intricately related in terms of needing the housing in order to grow the economy. And so you and I have talked about numerous times here. We know that in many parts of the state, we do have jobs available. We're not able to attract the workers for those jobs for a variety of reasons, one being housing. So an exciting thing that I was able to work on this year in shepherding it through the Senate was a $35 million housing bond. And we had many, many partners working on it, from Jen Holler, who used to be at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, who's now at VHCB, to the new Commissioner of Housing from right down the road in Guilford, Katie Buckley, who used to be the town manager in Guilford, now housing commissioner, and really worked integrally with those folks to get this bond passed through the Senate. And I know there's a tremendous amount of support in the House as well. And the real impetus was that we know a shortage of not just low-income housing, which we do, but also middle-income housing, that we are not able to attract families here because of the housing stock. And so to get that through was a tremendous success. Now, of course, it's held up right now because of the vetoed budget, but my fingers crossed to fully anticipate that we will be able to implement that bond. The other piece that I was very excited about was the expansion of the downtown tax credits. Again, we know when we're looking at the people who are interested, the younger people interested in relocating here, they want vibrant, thriving downtowns, and the downtown tax credit is a part of that. So I was very excited for those pieces. The other thing that was part of the economic development bill that I know the chair, although he's a Republican and we don't always see eye to eye, the committee did see to make sure there was a retirement plan within the economic development bill for those employees that are not able to access it through their employers. And that was something, again, bipartisan work, speaks to what you were talking to before, something we pride ourselves on in Vermont. So those three things were personally very satisfying for me. Mm-hmm. And there were also bits of other aspects of economic development that come out in other ways that we can get to, but those were the three big ones that were on my mind. So.
Now, going back to the housing a little bit, we've put $35 million that we're going to bond for. My understanding is what the housing people have said is they can take that 35.
Yes, and leverage it.
Yeah.
We're expecting it to pull in total about $100 million in new housing, which is just incredible.
And which has been non-existent.
Exactly, and it's been a challenge, I think, for many of us who've been talking about economic development and housing to really make this link. And one of the critical components is now, I feel like employers have been a lot more vocal in explaining to the communities in which they are located that they cannot attract employees. Often people will come, they'll look at available housing stock, and whether it is the actual person who's coming for the job or a trailing spouse, if there isn't available housing that doesn't need a lot of work, they're going to go take a job somewhere else. And we also know in terms of the pressure, if you don't have enough low income and middle housing, then you've got this downward pressure. People are buying up homes that perhaps are better suited for a more modest income family. But if those other homes aren't available at the upper end of the middle income, there's so much interplay there. So very few areas of Vermont have adequate housing at this point.
Yeah. Now the hope is that this will boost our economy and help get us out of the pretty much flat growth we've had for a few years. Are there other pieces of that in terms of, there was a lot of talk at the end of last session that we could combine tax reform and stimulating the economy in the alternative energy field.
Right.
Is there anything happening in that area?
Not in my committee, but I can't say that isn't happening in other committees. I know, as you know, on the House side, there's often things happening simultaneously that we're not aware of. So I can't speak to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
As we look to what we can do for the future, are there things that you're looking ahead to next year about yet?
Yeah, certainly there's been a lot of conversations in my caucus on the Senate side, I'm sure in yours too, on the House side, around looking at queuing up for an increase in the minimum wage. Mm-hmm. And of course, a lot of people will say, why would you even take this on when you probably are facing a veto? Mm-hmm. But we still need to continue to do the work that we think is right. And the other piece,
there were some complications to that.
Yes.
In that,
yes, there is a complication.
We didn't just go ahead last year, is what we found out, was that it actually might hurt some people.
Exactly.
So can you talk more to that?
Specifically, single parents with children. There's what we might call a cliff or a trough in their benefits, and
such as child care.
Exactly.
And housing assistance.
And so if you increase a wage and you price them out of the benefits that they were receiving in other credits to help their lives more affordable, you actually might be setting those folks back. So that was one of the reasons we needed to move more slowly than we thought. We were waiting for some more financial data from the Joint Fiscal Office, but we're prepared, I know, on our side of the building to really move on that. The other piece was the Family Medical Leave Insurance bill that you passed, and we'll be picking that up and having a look at that. And we want to be accountable for our constituents for making it more affordable for regular Vermonters to stay here, to live here, to come here.
Especially younger people with children.
Exactly.
Although my understanding is whether you're a young person with children or somebody who's also taking care of a parent,
yes,
some people need that flexibility to
Absolutely.
be able to attend to their families. And if there isn't anything more important than our families, then and we're off track.
Exactly, and as we look at Windham County in particular, we have, as you know, an aging population here, so more and more folks in my age range, the 50 to 60 range, we know we're going to have to take care of our parents in the near future, and so to have that flexibility with an employer is critical. It helps everyone when we have that opportunity.
Wonder if we could move to the budget a little
Sure.
bit. It has been a long, strange trip.
It
with
has,
this budget.
incredibly frustrating.
And I'm going back to January now,
Yeah.
where the governor put a budget out, and right off the bat, it had a $50 million hole in it,
Right.
because the governor had banked on thinking that his proposal
Yeah.
for school boards to trash their budgets,
Right.
start a new budget, as he asked,
Right.
to be level funded,
That's right.
and then to delay town meetings
Right.
until May.
Yeah.
Apparently, he assumed that was going to go through, and the legislature said no.
Yeah.
One of the main reasons is it would have added $50 million to the tax burden of property taxes.
That's right. Which he said was one of his goals going in, to
Yeah.
hold the line on property tax. So it was an odd choice
Yeah.
for his team to make, and it had not been vetted, as we say in politics, not ready for
Sure.
prime time.
Yeah.
And
So that means none of the other legislative leadership was brought in to be asked about this before.
oh no, we found out about that about a half hour before the budget address.
Yeah, so there wasn't a sense of working together on this.
No, and it was a pretty big ask at the last minute to come in the form of a speech. And at the time, we viewed it really as an anomaly, because many of the members on my side have worked for many years with Governor Scott when he was lieutenant governor and also in the Senate. I didn't know him as well, but certainly saw him in the role of lieutenant governor. And when that happened, with just finding out at the last minute before the budget address, we really did. We saw it as an anomaly, and they're still learning their job. We all have, essentially, the leadership, new jobs. But what we didn't realize is it was going to be an indication of things to come. This style of putting it out in the press, essentially first, not giving us an opportunity to work together. And then we have to do due diligence as legislators. That's what we're elected to do. We are not elected to be a rubber stamp. And so it's been an interesting dynamic, we'll say, of this assumption that a massive change, changing town meeting day, asking school boards to level fund across the board, in just a few weeks' time, to not be vetted by committees of jurisdiction, it's an outrageous ask.
There was a 2-week deadline we were given, too,
Yes.
because we were putting together the...
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's tough, because you want to interact in these negotiations in good faith. And you do not want to feel like the person or the team on the other side is disingenuous. There have been a few key moments during this session when I know I can only speak for my team on the Senate side. There were times when we feel like we were not negotiating in good faith, because the asks on the other side were so big that we were incredulous that it really was the expectation that this would be able to pass due diligence in the legislature. And that's our job. I'm just going to keep saying it. That is our job.
It's the way the system was
Absolutely.
designed.
Checks and balances.
You bet.
Yeah.
It almost reminds me of the budget that Governor Douglas put out, where he banked $50 million on selling the lottery to a Wall Street firm that no longer exists because it crashed when the market crashed.
So the details are important.
They are. Take us down. The House gets the budget.
Yeah.
Appropriations Committee says, there's a huge hole here. We'd like to work with the administration.
That's right.
At that point in time, the governor said...
The governor said to agency heads and commissioners, essentially, do not work with the legislature. They need to figure it out. Do not communicate. Do not give testimony that would be helpful in crafting a budget together. And that is a message that I think really needs to get out to voters of whatever political stripe.
Yeah.
Because it is, our job is to work with each other.
With each other.
Absolutely.
And this is where I was disappointed, because I heard the governor on the campaign trail
Yeah, we all
And
did.
I heard Governor Scott say at the time, I'm a moderate Republican, but I can work with Democrats.
That's right.
I can work with the majorities. And when this came out, in a sense, a gag order not to talk to the legislature, I'm not sure how that,
It doesn't jibe.
no, it doesn't jibe at all
Yeah.
with, I can work with the legislature.
Yeah.
So then we get to the end of the session.
Right.
Well, actually, I should say, the House passes its budget,
One dissenting vote.
143
Yeah.
to 1.
Yes.
Tripartisan support. The day after the budget, the Republican House members had a press conference to say how glad they were with this budget because it meets all the governor's criteria.
That's right. Because we were put in a box. No new taxes, no new fees.
Right. We
We
met
rose
that.
to the challenge. Exactly.
We met that.
That's right.
An incredible job by the House, by all members of the House Appropriations Committee.
Right.
Not long after that, the governor went on record as saying, this is a good budget. I would have voted for it if I were a member of the House.
Exactly.
So then we send the budget over to the Senate.
Yeah.
The Senate does its due diligence,
Right.
and you voted
Unanimously.
unanimously.
Unanimously. We had Republican members of the Senate stand up on the floor and say, I've never voted for a budget, but I am proud to vote for this budget.
Yeah,
That's what people need to remember.
yeah,
This was not a controversial budget until the last few weeks of the session.
and then 11 days before we were scheduled to adjourn,
Yeah.
we get a proposal around our education staff's health
That's right.
insurance.
Yeah.
Now this includes, people talk about teachers,
That's
but
right.
this
No, it's
includes
school staff.
all school staff.
That's right.
Whether it's a paraeducator who's making $14 an hour and will then be asked to
Pony up more
pony
for
up $2,000
That's right.
a year more. At that point, my understanding is the governor said, if I don't get this, I will veto the budget.
That's right.
The budget that just passed,
That I liked a few weeks ago now is not in the context of this other issue,
yeah,
which is separate
Yeah.
from the budget.
doesn't have anything to do with it.
That's right.
So from my perspective,
Yeah.
what I would say that politics trumps policy here.
In this instance, I'm sad to say that that is how I believe it played out.
Yeah.
And I say that, I do not say that lightly. I felt like we really tried, in Senate leadership, I know House too, I just don't want to speak for the House, to work with the governor's team and bring alternative proposals that would not involve taking a direct hit on collective bargaining.
Yeah.
It was a very important issue for us. And this is something I really want to take a minute to explain to folks who may not have any kind of a union background. I was a teacher for a long time, so I understand how collective bargaining works. You may have given up on a lot of other benefits early on to try to keep a line on the cost of your health insurance. So it can't be seen in isolation. It has to be seen over a series of years what the give and take was. And to then just unilaterally say, this is not going to be a piece of it anymore. You're all going to get the same, and you will no longer be negotiating locally. The original proposal had the governor negotiating with teachers.
Yeah.
It was unprecedented.
So that local control piece
Oh, absolutely.
is off the board. too,
Right.
then.
And so the other piece I think that's important to remember is that we also said in the language that was passed on the Senate, we are interested in having the people who will be impacted by this at the table with representatives of the administration, a representative from the school boards, and to talk long term. Is there a way to move everyone to a plan for simplicity's sake without negating the important dynamics of collective bargaining? So we agreed. We just said we're not going to do it in 11 days. And I think voters, when they stop to think about that, of course they don't want us to do that in 11 days. There'll be all kinds of unforeseen consequences. One of them, you alluded to, is that as we dove into the numbers, it wasn't going to impact all school staff in the same way. And you don't want the person making $14 an hour to see huge increases in their health insurance payments. Yeah.
As we looked into it more deeply too. It
Yeah.
wasn't clear all those savings are there. And one of the ways the savings supposedly will accrue is if people use less health care,
Sure.
which is a short-term thing.
Right. Exactly. There are so many unknowns about this, and it is really important for folks to understand that this is an opportunity that the governor had, and he and his team used it really well. Their talking point was about up to $26 million of savings. I have heard that over and over ad infinitum for the last few months. The problem with that is it was not real savings because it assumed local school boards, in saving that money, would then turn that money back over to the taxpayers in their town. But we all know that there's a long list that school boards keep track of maintenance work they need to do on their buildings, whether they want to hire back that half-time art teacher that they let go, building a new playground, goes on and on. When we save money at the local level, often it gets reinvested in the school because that's what Vermonters believe in, is reinvesting in education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the governor's plan didn't even turn all that money back over to
That's right.
It was shifting it to other spending.
That's right.
And that's where it becomes, from my perspective, obvious that the political has trumped the policy here.
Right.
Where we were out to make good policy that give the governor what he wants on the budget, and now he's turned around and vetoed it anyway.
Yeah.
One of the things that you have taken on this year is a leadership role in the Senate as
Yeah.
majority leader.
Yeah.
So you have been part of these discussions.
Right.
Since the session ended
Yeah.
and the veto has been, have there been talks between the administration and legislative leadership?
We've tried, and I want to be really clear, we've tried. And so we had 2 separate meetings that were set up last week. We thought someone from the governor's team, if not the governor himself, then someone from his team would attend. Both times they canceled on us. And the part I think that was most frustrating for those of us who had been trying to set it up is that we were told by the administration that they were going to send us either a memo or a letter outlining the direction in which they wanted to go in. So we were told, we can't meet, but we're going to get you this written document. Well, we'll have it in an hour and a half, or we'll have it 2 hours, 3 hours. Turns out it was into the next day. We never received it. And then the administration decided to go directly to the press without engaging us. What we said from the beginning is, we want to have a dialogue. We want to have the right people in the room. And that was one of the stipulations that they made, is they did not want to have, they were trying to dictate to us who needed to be in the room. That's not the role of the executive branch. We decide on the legislative side who we think the best committee chairs are to be in there, who are the people who have the expertise and the knowledge base to be working on these issues. It is, I think, a very short-sighted strategy to just have, whether it's the majority leader, sorry, I keep hitting my microphone, the majority leader, the pro tem, a few key people, speaker, a couple people. It's wrong-headed to think those folks are going to be able to crack a nut that's very complicated. Why not have more voices in the room? And it was very disappointing to us. I actually found out that we never received the memo. I found out that it went to the press first because I got a Twitter alert from Terry Hollenbeck, a reporter, who announced it. And that's not how we want to be engaged.
No.
Yeah.
Which is similar to the end of the session, because my understanding is the governor said, this is what I want. The House and Senate said, here's a proposal.
That's right.
The governor rejected it.
Right.
House and Senate said, here's another proposal. So you kept moving.
Right. Right up until the 11th hour, we thought we still might be able to come to a compromise. And I'm sure they have a different take on the negotiation, how it went, but I can tell you my caucus feels like we gave and gave and gave, and we did not get anything in return. And that was the point at which, on that last day of the session, when it was clear that it was not moving towards resolution, that we had to vote on what we felt like was our best position. And that's where we're going to negotiate from, that best position. Yeah.
As we move ahead,
Yeah.
we're looking at a veto session on the budget, the yield bill, which has to do with education financing.
That's right.
And then there's the pot bill.
Right.
in each of those cases, these were in process throughout the whole legislative session.
Yes.
And it's my understanding, I'm on Human Services
Yeah.
Committee, so we don't get firsthand of that. So, but in talking to my colleagues,
Yeah.
there was no input from the administration during the session
Yeah.
as to what we could help with the budget, the pot bill.
Right. And so it's very interesting. I saw a statement that was made by the governor's office a few weeks ago related to the pot bill, and I was so puzzled by it because the veto came down, they had an explanation of what they wanted in the bill, and I just scratched my head and thought, you could have had all of these things if you had been engaged with
Yeah.
people early on. And so that one of the things someone in the administration said to a reporter was, well, we didn't think that this bill was going to move this session. Now, that may be, and everybody's learning their jobs, from the pro tem to the speaker to the governor. But given what happened last session, given how much it's been in the news, something was going to happen
Yeah.
with that bill, because constituents would like to, a majority would like to see us move on this, as Massachusetts legalizes, Maine, Canada. So I don't know why they chose not to engage, because these were not heavy lifts.
No, and no surprise, at one point, the bill was sent to our committee, Human Services, the marijuana bill, where we wanted to look at some more educational pieces. And one of the things that we already have in place is there are 21 prevention coalitions out there
Yeah.
serving Vermont. They've been doing good work. If you look at the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, our numbers continue to go in the right direction with risky behaviors by youth.
Yeah.
We certainly can do better, but there is a landscape out there already looking at education. The hope is that we could create a system that would add more to that.
Yeah.
But it was no surprise, because there was quite an uproar when our committee took that bill off the wall and said, we're going to start
Right.
to take some testimony
Yeah.
and vote this out. So I'm not sure how anybody could have been surprised about that, because
Right.
as you know, we work in a building where, as I've said, everything is noticed and nothing is forgotten.
Exactly.
And
Absolutely.
and the last place you can try and keep a secret is in that building.
Absolutely.
It's a small building. We work together, so
Right.
people are aware of what's
Yes.
going on. So I just don't get that piece that they
Yeah.
weren't aware of it. So here we are.
Yeah.
Politics trumps policy, and we're going to have to deal with this.
Yeah.
What do you think that means for next year?
I've thought a lot about this, and the tension that we have in our chamber, which is, it's a little different dynamic in the House because the governor used to be in the Senate and people have long-term relationships with him. And I think we really were hoping for a much more collaborative process. And this summer, I think, is going to be about regrouping and figuring out, apart from their strategy in the governor's office, we have to be on our own path and continue to try to engage and continue to try to reach out and have conversations and not have communication through memo. I don't think that's good policy. But we have to get clear that we're setting and charting our own course. And I'm hoping, because I am I'm a glass half full kind of gal, I still hold out hope that we're going to be able to change this dynamic. But if not, we're going to be ready for a different kind of discussion next year.
Yeah.
So,
Representative Janet Ansell, who heads up the
Ways
House
and Means.
Ways and Means
Yeah.
Committee, was Governor Dean's chief
yes,
counsel.
exactly.
And I don't think there was a more fiscally conservative governor than we've seen than Howard Dean.
Yeah.
And what she said is every year Howard wanted to veto the budget. He said, it just doesn't go far enough for me. But he never did.
Yeah.
And she said, here's why. She said, because he knew it would poison any interactions from
Yes.
that day on. And I think that's what we've got right now.
Yeah.
Anything we do right now, the well has been poisoned. And that's in the first year. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, you know, the last night of the session on the Senate side, we ended on a very, very somber note. It was late, approaching midnight. It was a storm. It was a stormy night. It was lightning.
It was a dark and stormy
night. And it was, again, I think unprecedented to have a governor come into a chamber as we've just finished passing bills, one of which, the budget passed with overwhelming support a few weeks prior, and to stand in front of us on that night and not even take time to consider and to tell us directly, I will be vetoing your budget and your yield bill. And he got off the podium. Several of us were the sort of honor guard to walk him back to his office. I came back in the chamber, and a longtime senator approached me, and she said, that was such an opportunity squandered. This session has been an opportunity squandered because that governor had so much support in this chamber. We know him, we like him, we're ready to do work with him. And she, as much as anyone, was scratching her head. Why did he choose to have an adversarial relationship from the get-go? Yeah. So it was a sad ending for all of us. It really was. Yeah. So, but that's politics,
yeah.
right? So we'll get back at it.
We have a lot to do. One of
Yes.
the great things that's been happening this year is all the grassroots work, the resist and persist people, whether it's the huddles, the indivisible groups,
Yeah,
the
people
sister
are fired up.
districts. People are fired up, and for me, it's enthusiastic as we move ahead. Like you said, we're hearing from Vermonters what they want to see.
Yes.
And I'm ready to look at single-payer health care if we need to. If we really want to save, there's $400 million on the table. We have the studies. There's a lot of things we can move forward in a progressive way that moves Vermont ahead. And I think it's time for us to look in that direction as well.
Yeah, it is very encouraging to see how engaged so many of our constituents are right now, some of them for the first time.
Yeah.
And so that will give us the wind beneath our wings to continue to fight on their behalf.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your work this year.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you for taking the time, sharing with people, and we look forward to moving ahead.
Thank you, Mike.
And thank you again to all the people here at BCTV. I don't want to let a day go by that we don't remember the work they do to help us share our work with you. So thank you very much, and thanks for watching. Until next time, this is Mike Mrowicki. Bye-bye now.